everyone, and a very, very big welcome to this In Conversation about Jungle as part of MIF's Talks program. My name's Sandy George, and with me on stage in the middle is Greg McLean, the director of Jungle, and next to him is Yossi Ginsberg, who wrote the memoir on which Jungle was based. Look, thanks you guys for making yourself so available.
Thanks for having us. Welcome, Yossi.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Sandy.
I feel as though it's a real adventure film, all the more potent because you know it's true. And I just love, in my humble opinion, the fact that it's got the potential to get a really broad audience, but we won't know that till October. But just for making it and for opening the festival, let's give them a round of applause before we even begin.
Thank you very much. It's very kind words.
So, Greg.
Yes, hello.
Hello. He's a Melbourneian.
I am. Bendigo, actually Bendigo. Anyone here from Bendigo? No.
And he's frankly been a bit of a legend ever since he made his debut film Wolf Creek. And it's such a rare film, Wolf Creek, because it was genre, but it was a festival and a critical hit, and it was certainly a commercial hit, even though I didn't much like that it stopped me doing road trips for a couple of years there. And Jungle is Greg's sixth feature film, and his fifth film, The Belko Experiment, is part of the Melbourne Film Festival as well, if you want to catch that. And another interesting thing I think about Greg is that he's produced and executive produced more films than he's directed, which I think is always an interesting thing. As I said, Yossi wrote the memoir, so it was him that was lost in the Amazon rainforest for 3 weeks, several decades ago, and it sounds rather biblical to say it, but he nearly died for us, or for our viewing pleasure anyway, though I'm not sure when Daniel Radcliffe squeezed those worms out of his forehead that was pleasure, but anywho. And Yossi's Israeli by birth, lived in Australia for a decade from 1999 and has just moved back to Australia, to Mullumbimby in northern New South Wales, so he's nearly one of us. But you'll learn...
I am one of you.
He is one of us.
Yeah. I just want to set it right. I was born on Anzac Day, April 25th.
I
know. I was born in Israel, but I was born on Anzac Day.
Oh.
When I go to a football game, all the audience gets on their feet and they all scream, "Yossi, Yossi, Yossi!" You know. I want to tell you, I'm Australian. Yeah?
That's what they were saying.
Here was me thinking this is a filmmaking convo, but it's turning into a comedy. Okay. So my plan is this. The three of us are going to talk for a while, and then we're going to show the trailer first.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's remind those who have seen the film what it was like, and those that haven't, you'll get a bit of a taste of it.
The trailer.
So, film is the director's vision, so I think it's only right we start with you, Greg.
Sure.
Tell us how you came to be involved and to what extent you knew about the film already.
I got a phone call from Gary Hamilton, who runs ArcLight Films, which is a distribution company based in LA in Australia, and I'd known him for many years. And he said, there's this script called Jungle, would you like to read it? I knew the book was written 20-something years, 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And the film, there's a very interesting and you know, it's a fascinating kind of life from when Yossi first wrote the book. And then, you know, I think there's been 3 or 4 different attempts to make the film. 2 people that I know, the Spierig brothers, Peter and Michael Spierig, the film was up and financed, and the film was going, and it was about 6 or 7 years ago. And something happened to the financing, and the film fell apart. So it was kind of this huge, you know, films go on journeys, and sometimes they fall apart, and It's just something that happens. After that happened, I think Dana Lustig, the producer who originally worked with Yossi on the film most closely, they put themselves together, and they somehow came across ArcLight's desk. ArcLight thought of me. Gary thought of me from Wolf Creek because they distributed my first movie. And I read it, and I just thought this is just an incredible story, and I would love to be involved in it. And, you know, I just said, what do I have to do to get the job? And I had to meet a bunch of people and talk to Dana and talk to everybody, and I talked to Yossi, and then I think I somehow managed to convince them to let me do it. And
Gary actually told me that you rang him about some other project.
Probably.
Just trying to get to the truth. The truth.
Oh, I mean, I think there was conversations going on. We were probably
Yeah.
just talking about.
Yeah.
He's always pitching me something, and I'm always pitching him something. And
Yeah. You said it immediately appealed, but can you drill down about why, from a filmmaking perspective, and from the point of view of you as a director, why it appealed?
I was definitely looking to do something outside of horror genre. I was looking to do a more serious, something that was focused on someone saving a life rather than trying to take it.
Why?
Because I'm a grown up now, and it's like, I think, before I got into film, I was at art school for 6 years and directed theatre and opera, and so I come from the art world, and I accidentally made a good horror film, and people just thought I'm into horror films, when I'm actually into every kind of film and story, and so, if you make something and it works, everyone just wants you to keep doing that forever until you die, and it's kind of very boring. So, well, it's great that you do something that people enjoyed in the genre. Most people, if someone writes a punk song, they've got a love ballad in their back drawer that I'd love to get out. I think all artists kind of are frustrated sometimes by that thing of being, you always want to do lots of different things.
Yeah.
But having said that, what appealed to me was the fact that it was a beautiful, beautiful story, full of miracles, about spiritual development. As a filmmaker, it would be almost an impossible challenge to pull the film off. And I felt like it was time to... I was probably at a place I wanted to do something different personally as well. I wanted to get out of Australia and get out of here and just do something that would be a wild adventure, and see if I could do it. Because, the film has been tried and failed many times. I thought, let's give it a shot and,
Yeah.
do it. And also, I mean, the biggest thing for me was the, there's just to me, there's a real primary power, and obviously I'm biased because I just made the movie. But what I fell in love with was this incredibly primary power in the story, because of Yossi's character and because of what he saw and understood by the experience. By going through this incredibly traumatic and terrifying and frightening real life adventure, he stumbled upon these realizations about life, which you've kind of made a career about, communicating those experiences. And it's the kind of thing that can only happen by having such an intense experience. And so as a filmmaker, to be able to attempt to capture what happened, and you can only ever capture a tiny fragment of what it is, because there's some big ideas in there about survival, about what makes human beings able to survive any situation because of our ability to imagine ourselves out of the situation. And it speaks to, what art is, what music is, what stories are, and why we tell stories. To see a character who, and for those of you who haven't seen the film, Yossi was stuck in the jungle by himself for almost 3 weeks. And one of the things that happens is, and Yossi can speak more to this, as a way to escape the really terrifying situation of being completely isolated and alone and probably going to die, he used his imagination to basically journey out of there and keep himself focused and sane, and freed himself purely through imagination. And I believe that's and no one really, because, and Yossi again can speak more to this, about the fact that there's a million times he should have died and could have died and miraculously didn't during that experience. And which also speaks to the notion of providence and something looking out for you and all these kind of things. But the role of imagination in that was just, the role of using the imagination and the inward journey to survive this outward thing, I think is a very useful concept to put into the world. And obviously the world now is full of terrible, horrible stuff that's going on. And, to find an inspiring story, I thought was a good thing to do.
Yossi, speak to that. How did you survive? Would all of us have survived in the same way, do you think?
Yeah. That's one of the biggest personal discoveries about survival. In essence, survival is peak performance. It's a natural peak performance, because the moment your life is at risk, something is very powerful is awakened, and people become the best version of themselves. Sometimes they become superheroes. And this is not just a phrase, but you go on YouTube and you see a video of a mother lifting a truck because a child is stuck under the truck. This is superhero power. Why? Because survival makes people the best that they can be. And that's why I think it's a natural state. Of course, it's not enough, you know. In general, I'm not like when people look at me as an expert on survival, I don't believe in it. I'm not the type of like learning about which plant and how to dig and, how to make fire. That's, I think survival is our expertise. That's why we're all here, because we are survivors. There's iterations of, like thousands of years or maybe millions of years that brought us here. Actually, we're too good at survival, like at the cost of many other species that don't survive because of us. However, it's not enough, and that's what Greg mentioned. My survival skills, I know, weren't enough to keep me alive. There was something else that kept me alive, beside me. And I couldn't deny it, because I went through it. So when people ask me, do you believe in God? I say, absolutely not, because once you know, you're not a believer anymore. This experience made me not be a believer. I experienced miracles. What was referred to imagination is very, very interesting. I actually use my imagination only at night. For some reason, during the day, during the light hours, I would just be okay. But at night, I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep for 3 weeks, not a minute. And I knew that I need to rest, because all day I was exerting energy, and at night I needed to regenerate. But at night is where the jungle awakens. All the nocturnals come, all the predators, and everything is moving, and everything is screeching and screaming. And it's impossible at that situation, without a fire, without a gun, without anything, just lying between the roots of a tree to find some rest. So what I used to do is cast myself out of the jungle using movies. Those were actually hallucinations that I made up. And after I made 3 or 4, I didn't need to make anymore. I kept using the same ones. And I would just use it to pass the night by having vivid imagination. But the reason why this is so interesting is, most of you saw the movie. There's a woman that appears on the 17th day. And she appears out of the blue, and I take care of her for 2 days. She's also imagination. But this one is not my imagination. So this is something that, until this very day, I cannot exactly explain it, because I was using my imagination all the time. I didn't use it to make her up. Somebody else made her up. This wasn't my doing. So I'm saying she's imaginary, but she's not the fruit of my imagination. I still don't know who made her up. Yeah, you can say it's your subconscious, but I'm not aware of that. If it's my subconscious, it's still not my doing. It's not my conscious doing. She appeared next to me. I believed she was there. I talked to her. I made her a place to sleep next to me, which meant a lot of physical effort to break palm fronds and, like to make a place for somebody next to me. So that imagination that saved me was even beyond my own imagination, which, as I say, I refer to some things that are really mystery.
I was going to ask you about that, because I wasn't clear from the film whether she was imagination or real. I thought she can't be real, but that was treated quite differently from the other
That's right.
parts of the film. I mean, you're saying that survival kicks in, but are you sure that it's not just your personality that kicked in? Like, do you think that anyone would have survived that?
Yes. Well, as I say, it's not enough, because there was more than my hanging on to dear life. Hanging on to dear life is natural. Any healthy individual will find his own way in. And I say it's not a big deal. I accepted that I was a hero. I discovered that I'm the hero, because until that moment I was the youngest in the foursome, and luckily there was somebody weaker than me, which I discovered my darkness, because I actually used his weakness to pretend I'm strong. But once I lost everybody, I knew I'm alone and I cannot deal with it. But then I discovered that I can. So this discovery that I am strong enough, I am a hero. But I'm saying it's not a big deal, because the circumstances make heroes. A real hero is actually, for me, a hero in the day-to-day life, where you don't have the circumstances. adrenaline, I know, all your body kicks into survival mode. Of course you're becoming a hero. That's a real situation. But on the day-to-day, in the grinding, mundane, to be a hero in such circumstances, that's true heroism for me, not extreme achievement heroism, So I've seen them survive in situations that are not as exotic. My ex-wife had breast cancer. That's not very exotic. My story is exotic. There's jaguars, it's an Amazonian rainforest. Everybody wants to hear the story. But when my ex-wife dealt with the breast cancer, the family was leaning on her. She didn't need support. She could support the neighborhood. The moment you face death, life becomes so precious. Every single breath becomes so precious. It's natural. That's one of the strongest reminder to myself, like to remember how fleeting life can be, how precious every moment is. And this is what my aspiration for the movie was, that it will bring that notion as well beyond the amazing adventure.
Is the film your story? I'm very interested in this because obviously it's a piece of entertainment. You've got to get the audience from A to B to C. I mean, can I get you both to comment on that?
I'll just briefly comment that it is the true story, and a lot because of the passion and integrity of Greg. Greg had no interest whatsoever to embellish. And I'm grateful to him for really using me as a resource, and he did. And it's not always easy to use somebody that went through it, and it's his story, it can be a hindrance to the production, which I understand. But it was very important to Greg to tell the true story, and that's a lot to say about him.
Greg, how did you walk that line between being a piece of entertainment and properly depicting Yossi's story?
Well, I mean, my reference to the whole story was the book. Like, to me, the book is the perfect telling of the story, and there really can be, you can make a movie out about it, you can do all kinds of things, but to me there's Yossi wrote the book down like 12 months?
6 months.
6 months.
Like that.
So 6 months after the event, he basically sat down and just wrote it down. And the book's power is that it's totally unfiltered, it's totally it's not particularly crafted by a great writer, but the honesty is just pouring off it, and you read it and just go, it's just pure experiential description of what happened and how we felt. And he's so close to the event that the book, to me, was what I was striving to get close to. So, in the course of the years of development of the movie, and with other filmmakers and producers and people that come along, the script develops into this action movie, and there's stuff in there. And so when we started pre-production, and that, actually, when I came on, I read a script and I thought that was very good. Then they said, there's another couple of drafts, and I said, can I read all those? Let me read all the scripts. And the one that was closest to the book, I said, this is the one that I want to make. Like, I'm not interested in this other stuff. There's all this other stuff that was added in. Like, there was things that were just like, clearly, to me, I didn't understand why they were doing that stuff, because it wasn't in the book. So my motivation was to try and get clear on it, just be simple and clear and direct with what happened. And, that was my goal. So I basically, when we got down to Colombia, I just wanted to sit down with Yossi for 2 weeks before we started and said, okay, let's read this scene. What really happened in the scene that's written here? And Yossi would say, well, actually, that really didn't happen like that. And it wasn't like that at all. And I said, oh, really? Why aren't we telling that? And then I would...
This is 2 weeks before production.
Yeah, and everyone was freaking out because it's like, we
bet.
we got locked in a hotel room and everyone's like, get Yossi out of here. Greg's changing the script. And I'm like, look, I don't want to walk onto the set without doing the real thing. Like, it's, this is it. This is the time we're making it. So it's got to be right. So within the time we had, I tried to corral it to being, just directly as close as I could with what happened. Obviously, there are some things where you can't. There's just some things that happen that you just can't physically do because they're either just cinematically don't make sense for the audience, or it's just a bit of stuff like where a character went there and, well, in this big separation sequence, what really happened was there was a trip back to the village to make the boat there and do all kinds of things, and just mechanical stuff that you go, well, you could spend half an hour doing that on screen, but the essence of it is this. They split, and this is what happened. So I just wanted to walk onto set and to be able to talk to the actors honestly and say, the essence of what was happening emotionally was this idea. Let's try and get that essential story across. And that was the goal. And, I think we did a pretty, Yossi will be the judge of whether it is whether we achieved capturing the essence of what the book is trying to say.
Was that hard on the scriptwriter because that person had been on board for more than a decade?
I don't think it was hard on him. I mean, I think Justin...
What did that mean?
No, I wanted to comment.
Oh,
sorry.
go on.
Because,
Go on.
No, because it's it's because it's really fascinating. I sat with Greg in Colombia, I think for 2 days. We locked ourselves behind the door, and hundreds of notes, and then the notes were incorporated into the screenplay, and they were sent to the screenplay writer. And that's what's fascinating about it. He fought back. He didn't accept it, you know? Said no, and he went back to Greg. And I actually thought there's something very interesting here because it's more than my story and my passion. Justin Monjo had his vision, and it wasn't less important, and he gave a big fight. Yeah, I hated him, but I respect him, you know? This is my story, but no, he had his vision, and he went to Greg and said no, you know, and he fought over. So in the end, it was a compromise, and I have respect for that because I just watched a documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune. I don't know if anybody watched that. And he's saying you have to rape the story. You cannot take a book and make it a movie. You have to rape it, you know. And that's, in a way, you know, you have other people that have other creativities, they have their juices, they're not yes men here. A screenplay writer has his own integrity, has his own vision. A director has, and also an actor has. And I realized that, and I think the essence is captured. And when it's not, it's actually respectful because this is not a documentary, as I was explained on the first day of shooting.
It's interesting. I'd kind of forgotten the clashes we had because I do tend to forget those things. But yeah, Justin, and I think also because Justin had been telling the story in the way that you had been telling the story for 30 years.
Yeah.
Justin had been telling the story for 12 years,
yeah.
And repeatedly. So he'd been written every iteration of the script. I mean, he was been on it for a decade. It's amazing. And so he was, I think that's right. Because we were saying, oh no, we're going to go back. He's like, no, it doesn't make sense because it's like, well, that's not what happened. He's like, no, but the script needs to be this. And
Did you feel very caught in the middle?
no, because ultimately I'm the director,
You're
so
the
I get to
boss.
say, well, I'm shooting it this way, so you can either do it or, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not nasty about it, but it's just, when push comes to shove, you're going to set up cameras, it's like, it's got to be what it's got to be.
But at that time, did you think, oh, I should have done this earlier? Because it's
Yeah,
4.
definitely. Well, I didn't have access to Yossi until, you didn't,
Yeah.
once Yossi arrived and we had to sit down, and I started to understand.
Oh,
that-
you hadn't met
We met.
We met. It wasn't like, it was we just spent a full day. First time we met in LA
California,
for a day.
in the hills, we walked and
We just spent
it
an
was a
entire
beautiful-
day just talking about the story. And actually, it was interesting because I don't know if you remember, but that entire day you basically, recounted the story like it was amazing. It was like watching the movie because you just recounted beat for beat the entire thing for like hours, and it was like amazing and fascinating to hear that and feel that firsthand. But then, but when we got into production, it was frantic because there were many problems to solve at that time in terms of basically, I won't bore you with the details, but we had to find a location to shoot it in. There'd been a massive drought in Colombia. We went there on location scout, and the jungles were dry and dirty and looked horrible. They looked really crappy. And the rivers were dry. And we were there going, oh my God, how are we going to do this jungle movie in the rivers and lush jungle? There's nothing here. And we said, okay, let's go to North Queensland. So we jumped on a plane, went to North Queensland. Went to a place called the Tully River, which is gorgeous, but is nowhere near as epic as Colombia. And we were like, how are we going to do this sequence? There's a big sequence in the film, and there's a real part of the key story where Yossi and Kevin, who separate from the other characters, they are rafting down the river and they hit a huge rock that's at the mouth of a deadly gorge, stone gorge. Now we were thinking, how are we going to do this scene? And we thought we're going to put green screen and do visual effects and do all this stuff. And it's like going, there was a lot of problems to try and work out. And coincidentally, one day we're walking up the river yet again, trying to find a spot to do a scene. And I happened to say to the location guy, what's down that way? Because we always turned right, we never turned left. And I saw these mountains and things. And he said, oh, there's nothing down there. There's just really, very thin stone gorge. It's horrible, and people don't go down there because it's dangerous, and just forget about that. I'm like, what? That sounds like exactly what we need. So we walked down there and it actually looks a pretty good match.
That's back in Colombia.
Yeah, pretty good match for what we needed. So
Yeah.
it really solved a lot of problems. But in the middle of that, we were trying to get together and, talk about the script.
But wasn't it dry in Colombia?
No, actually, because we went to Queensland, by the time we went back to Colombia, the rains had
rained.
started.
Right, okay.
Because El Nino went through and we've been saying, what's the long-range weather forecast for South America and is the drought going to break? And everyone had different opinions about what was going to happen. And eventually it did break and the rivers started flowing and that was beautiful and it all worked out.
Yeah. I'd like to move on to the casting and actual production. So, Jose, can we show the clip first? This is our only other clip. Al from the Melbourne Film Festival emailed me during the week and he said, you do know that clip's 5 minutes, don't you? Do you really want to show it all? And I was like, yeah, it's such an amazing sequence. Yossi, you and I exchanged a look while it was playing. Why was that?
That's one of the biggest fights I had with Greg, because I told him, I didn't cry. I didn't cry. He said, look, you cannot have two guys at the same situation being cool. Kevin is like holding it, you have to cry. I said, but I didn't cry. We fought about it. He won.
I just thought it would be, I think the key thing at that point is to try and get people to relate to the character. And I just thought it's a terrifying situation and to not react, like that would be less relatable.
Yeah. I'm cool. I'm cool about it.
Yeah, not holding a grudge or anything at all. Just bring it up 6 months later. Yeah. No, it's fine.
So that's the chasm that you found?
It is, yeah.
And, I mean, how did you do that scene? It seems so dangerous.
It is dangerous. That was my biggest, people say, was it tough shooting in the jungle of Colombia? Yes, but the most scariest thing of the whole shoot was that location. Because, all that stuff is we were literally from here to there constantly from that river. And if you slipped in and got in that chasm, you would die. So, and we had 150 or so, 200 people running up and down there, delivering lenses and, stuff, and Daniel and Alex and everybody there, and all running around these slippery rocks. And everyone had to have two safety harnesses on them that were back up to the where the ledge where you had to rappel down into the location. So getting 200 people down into that spot to set up a shot, and then would rain, and the rains were coming, so the river would be rising, and they'd be like, quick, everyone get out of the canyon now, because the river's going to be 20 feet higher in 2 minutes, and you'd be running up and down, and then you'd run back down, and it was crazy. I mean, there's some I can't wait till the film comes out, because I've got some amazing behind-the-scenes stills that I want to get out there about trying to shoot that, and where we were doing to shoot that, and it was very scary, because I was very concerned that one of the, that someone would go in and someone would die, because and also the Colombians, a lot of them were fairly, we had good safety, but there was a couple of people, you look at them and they just clearly didn't have, very good physical skills, and they were walking around with very bad shoes on the edge of these slippery rocks, just standing there looking around. It's like going, that guy's going to fall in, and I really don't want to be responsible for someone dying in this movie. So it was fairly intense, wasn't it? And also Daniel, throwing Daniel Radcliffe in that river on a harness, and what we painted out is he's in there, we've got a harness under his on his back with people holding him, and lucky we didn't let him go, because it was pretty.
I'm wondering who your insurer was, actually.
I don't think they were aware that what we were doing down there.
Yossi, how did you feel about Daniel Radcliffe playing you?
I was from the first, once from the minute I heard the name, I was overwhelmed, this I think is the most iconic face of modern times. I think if they make a time bubble, last century they put Barbie in, this century they put Harry Potter. There's no question about it. So he's the most iconic face. So I was honored just by having a man so known play me. he was very sincere. The first time I met him was 2 Skype interviews that he did with me, each 4 hours. It was immediately like bonding, even over Skype. He's like very down to earth, very polite man, very sincere. His sincerity, for example, was, apart from interviewing me and talking to me, he wanted me to make lists of all the books and music I was listening to when I was at that age. He wanted to hear the music, read the books, kind of get under my skin. We met for the first time in Colombia, at the same time. No, actually, this was already just before the shooting started. And only then I discovered that he's literally half my size, physically. But at the same time, I also discovered, as Greg can attest, Daniel is a short man. He's not a small man. He's not a small man at all. He's a man with a giant spirit, tremendous integrity. Again, example, he was living on 1 hard-boiled egg and 1 else bar a day, but not in a clean environment. In an environment where everybody is eating big steaks and big meals, and he needed a lot of discipline to stick to his hard-boiled egg, and he wanted to feel the starvation. Apart from losing weight, he also wanted to feel what it is to be. So a lot of integrity, and I'm really privileged and honored, and I couldn't be happier.
Greg, I want to ask you about the casting of Daniel and also how that affected the financing of the film. But I just want to introduce Joel Jackson first. Joel, can you stand up? You have to do a few twists around.
Joel, who plays Marcus Stam in the film.
Yeah, one of the 4 that go into
He's
the
an
film.
absolute superstar, by the way. Look at this guy. He slayed it in the Peter Allen miniseries. I mean, Joel is so great. I'm a huge fan. What do you think of Joel?
I love him.
Yeah.
And on
No,
opening,
best.
sorry.
We're good friends, and that's a deep friendship. And also, the way he took on, it's not an easy role, Marcus. And actually the entire movie, as the book, are in memory of Marcus. And that's a big part of the story. That's the heart of the story.
Yeah.
And what happened between us and Marcus, that's what makes it more than just a survival story. There is that theme of the Lord of the Fly, what happened to people, their own darkness under the circumstances of the wilderness. And Joel is portraying that sensitivity in a genius way. And he's a great guy and a great actor.
And no one recognised him on opening night without his glasses, so he was able to spy on what people were really saying about the film. So after Greg answers this question, I can't believe we've only got about 12 minutes left.
What? We haven't started
It's
talking
the
yet.
truth. After you talk about the casting of Daniel,
Yes.
I'll open it up to you guys for some questions.
Sure. What would you like to know, Sandy?
Well, who suggested him? What was your reaction to him? Because I wouldn't have thought he was your natural choice, which is probably why half the question was also about financing and the way films are financed. That's
I think it was as simple as, one of the producers calling up and say, hey, there's lists and lists of people, it's crazy making this, just, we go through every list of every actor in the world. And then someone said, oh, Daniel Radcliffe. And I think initially I was probably like, because I had a particular vision, because I've seen him very tall. And then I started to look at his movies and what he's doing. I thought, God, this guy's a bloody good actor. And I just thought, yeah, this is interesting. And then I jumped on a call with him and we talked, and I just thought, God, this guy's so intelligent and scary. And I realized how committed he was as an actor to being a good actor and doing a good job. And I think stupidly I thought, well, I didn't really assume, I just didn't know, but I thought he's so famous, he's an incredibly famous person because those films are, part of the cultural fabric of the world at the moment.
Exactly.
So to get to talk to him and to just know that it's all about he just trying to find projects that challenge him as an actor. I thought, that's what I want to do as a director. I'm trying to find things that push me as well. So I thought that we connected on that idea of saying, let's do this really hard thing and help each other do it. And that kind of just, that's when I just thought, wow, this is going to be amazing. And he was very impressive. Like, I work with some bigger actors, but he's at that level of kind of fame. It does go into a strange place because his life, when you're that famous, you really have to have security people all the time. And it was interesting experiencing that thing of basically how limited your life becomes when you're that famous, because you really have to have everything organized around you forever, wherever you go, whatever you do. You can't go to a restaurant or a cafe. You can't go down the street without your team having secured. Like, it's quite strange and kind of sad in some ways. But he is very humble and very focused, and his work ethic was incredible. His dedication to doing a good job and honouring Yossi's story was just remarkable. And even though he was starving himself, because in the film, when you see it or if you have seen it, Daniel had to do 2 periods of weight loss because we shot in Colombia and Queensland. At the end of the Colombia period, it's the end scene where he basically is completely emaciated and basically is skeletal, which is what Yossi was after weeks in the jungle. And he did that transformation. And he did that, when you get hungry and you get a bit cranky, hangry, he was basically doing that, but still being able to be totally affable and, lovely to the crew and respectful and helpful and charming while he was basically starving himself, which I'd be out of my mind at just being the biggest prick under the sun and just like, where's my sandwich? I mean, he was like, amazing. So, I can't praise him enough.
Yeah. And just a little bit about the relationship between casting and financing.
Well, I mean, Daniel's a global superstar, so it certainly helps to have someone like that. And this is a small independent Australian film, and it wasn't a very big budget film, so it certainly helped the movie galvanise pretty quickly. But like everything, it's still a challenge to get it all together and to bring the pieces. But yeah, he's a big part of that. When you have someone that's
I'm going to sneak in one more question before I go to the audience. How did you survive on set? How do you survive on set when it's so dangerous and so full on, and you've got to get?
My middle name is Danger.
No, but seriously, what are the tricks for filmmakers in the room?
I love being on set. I love that's what I live for. I love being surrounded with that creative energy of a group of people striving to pull off some amazing thing. It energizes me and I adore it. I mean, I think, I grew up, I'm the youngest of 16 children.
16?
Yeah. So my childhood and my life has, I'm used to being surrounded by large groups of people screaming. So being on a film set for me is the most natural thing in the world. Like, that's not unusual for me. I know a lot of people make them fairly tense, but I relax. The more crazier it gets, the more I relax, the more I have fun. So I'm kind of born to direct. Yeah. I like it.
I quickly want to comment that there's tremendous amount of leadership needed from Greg, and also that it's very lonely to be in that position because there are bad days and tough days and schedules, and I felt for him, and I also admired his leadership, and also that position of the industry to actually have the director be the leader, not the producer, and he was a really inspirational leader to all of us.
Okay, questions. Who's got specific questions that they would like to ask at this point? We have 2 microphone rovers.
Probably, we basically, because it was an Australian film and it was financed by Screen Queensland, Film Victoria, Screen Australia, we kind of took a lot of heads of department out of Queensland. So we probably took about 20 people, maybe 20 Aussies, mainly the heads of department.
Even 30, I think.
DP, production designer, some of their key team, all the producers. Dana's from Israel but lives in Los Angeles. Yossi lives everywhere. So we kind of, we took probably about 20 Aussies in different departments, but the rest of the crew, while we're in Colombia, were Colombian.
Yeah.
I was just a huge fan of him. I've been hearing about him as he's the next superstar of Australian cinematography, and he is just a genius.
He's just the humblest, nicest,
Yeah.
You should name him.
Stefan Duskio. If you
It's
can
just
work with
great.
him, do. He's incredible. You know, just a great artist, and he's going to be. You know, I mean, it's a shame actually that you know this is probably one of the last films I'll ever do in Australia because when you're that good, you just get taken into the big world, which is great. But he's an amazing cinematographer and fantastic energy on set.
Beautiful man.
Very skilled. Trained under Andrew Lesney, one of the great cinematographers in the world. So you know, and fun. Lots of fun.
Really, it was really a privilege to work with him. He's like really one of the guys, and so no ego whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so dedicated and perfectionist, you know.
He's good.
I was on a missile boat for 3 years. It's a mandatory thing, and I was selected for the Navy, and I spent 3 years on a missile boat. I was very fortunate because I was drafted in '77, in October of '77, and it was exactly the time where Anwar Sadat arrived in Israel and signed a peace contract with Menachem Begin, and I was stationed in Sharm el-Sheikh. So I was actually in transition of Sinai from Israeli occupation to Egyptian. So there was no tension whatsoever. And it turned to be one of the happiest time in my life because I became a fisherman. We had no tension on that border, and they didn't know what to do with us. So I actually spent a lot of time in the Sinai and became literally a Bedouin. My attraction to exoticism and romance started there with the Bedouins of the Sinai Desert. So I wouldn't say that it was physical training, but I was independent. I was alone in the world since I was 18, you know, like away from home. But it wasn't the physical survivor training. As a soldier on the missile boat, it wasn't very physical. It was more technical, navigation and radars and things like that. I wasn't really physical. But having no tension, I was a spear fisherman. I was, you know, like I was an adventurer. I'm still is, you know, adventure. Life is an adventure, and I live it like that. But I was definitely inexperienced in Amazon. I made terrible mistakes, such as not recognizing that huge rains can make the river rise and flood the jungle. It still stuck to the riverbank and was taken by a huge flood, and by miracle didn't die. I was looking at the mountain ridge and naively think that if I'll go up there, it's going to be straight line, not realizing there's valleys and gorges. You know, I made many mistakes just being so inexperienced. I was 21 years old, 21 and a half. And so in a way, I left home already, but it wasn't the physical trainings that made me prepared for this trip now.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know, things that move me. I mean, I guess I'm just looking for, I mean, emotional intensity in stories, things that, you know, just move you, I guess. That's all it's about. I guess, you know, movies for me, you know, it's about trying to connect with somebody that's powerfully going to change your way of thinking or feeling. And, you know, that's kind of why I'm attracted to horror films in one way, because they're about intense emotional experience. And fear is a very readily accessible emotion. Comedy is another thing. You know, the drama is something. You know, so I guess I just try and find things that are emotionally powerful. And this is why I was attracted to this story, because I felt like I found it very moving, the story of Yossi's story, and I just, you know, thought other people might like that story.
First of all, I've made an expression about my life, and it is, if I was a cat, I was dead long ago. You know? So, in the story itself, you know, there's one thing that didn't make it into the movie, but I fell once off a cliff, and a tree that grew out of the cliff just caught me in midair, you know. This was like falling off a cliff straight to rocks next to the river. And when you experience something like that, you cannot rationalize it. You cannot say, oh, you know, you just know there was an intervention, you know. And that knowledge, appeared again and again. And it was even more subtle to find the perfect tree in the evening when I needed to rest, because I needed a certain tree, a buttress tree, to create a bit of a shelter and to find the perfect tree. I ate very little, but without that food, I couldn't have survived. So each time I found a nest with a couple of eggs, I just felt the eye of providence guiding it. It was a strong feeling. But I just want to explain the last scene in the movie, where you see that they turn the boat and go back. I arrived at that playa after 3 days of walking and searching for a playa. The reason why I was doing it, the airplane gave me a sign that the search has begun. So I understood that I have to make myself visible. But in the rainy season, there are no playas because the river is rising, so the water reaches from, straight to the wood. There was no playa.
You mean beach?
Beach.
Yeah.
So it took me 3 days of walking until I found that playa. I arrived on the 19th day of my solitude and collapsed, and I couldn't stand anymore. So I just rolled my initial, moving some logs. So if I lose my consciousness, by that time I was experienced. I had one flood, so I crawled away from the riverbank into almost to the edge of the jungle, so another flood would not take me. The boat that Kevin came with, an hour earlier, decided to turn. It was already over. It was getting dark. It was over. And Tico tried to turn, but he couldn't turn because the river was too narrow and too dangerous, and he couldn't maneuver the boat, the dugout canoe, to do the turn. So he was forced, against his will, to keep on going upriver to search for a better place to land. And it was getting dark. It was dangerous for them on the boat. So when they saw finally that opening, that playa, that little beach, they landed and immediately jumped out of the river to quickly turn the boat. On 120 miles of river, they stopped to turn the boat where I collapsed the night before. So when you live through that, you cannot rationalize it. And I felt it's rude to rationalize it in retrospective to try and, so I remain with that notion that, I've experienced miracles and that it was so urgent that the veil was removed until you can see the miracles without the veil. So that's why I say I've went through it. It has changed my life forever.
What do you think happened to the other two people?
Look, we will never know. I know they're dead, So I just imagine that it was like a flash flood going down the tributaries. They were going up a tributary, and that it took them and killed them quickly, because that's what I would like to believe, that it wasn't a lot of misery and suffering. By the way, I love them both, The book is dedicated to Marcus, but I cannot tell you that that Carl was, he was a shady character, but he wasn't an evil. And I'm so glad that we didn't make him evil, because Greg referred to previous, it's such a natural thing to turn one guy into the bad guy. We had scripts where he was chasing us with machetes in the middle of the night, trying to behead us. Yes, we had all kinds of things in previous. So he wasn't a bad guy. Yeah. He was a shady guy. He was a pathological liar. He was very irresponsible, but there was a lot of charm to him, and there was compassion to him. He loved Marcus. He really cared for him. I think that it's very subtle to show that in the movie, and not the easiest choice. So yeah. I
remember having long. These are some of the fights that you weren't part of, but I was later in the stage, about that same time, the company brought on like an American script expert to come and beef up the thriller side of the movie, and I reluctantly was forced to do these phone calls with this New York script doctor, and it ended with me screaming and telling them all to go themselves, but it was like literally, okay, Now listen, the problem with this movie, there's no conflict, okay? This guy, can we find some more bodies of backpackers that he's killed before? And what if they just find like all these skulls? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, we're adapting a book. No, it does, screw the book. This is like the movie, right? The movie, we gotta. And I had a couple of these phone calls, and I was like, called the other producers. I said, what the hell are you guys doing? They're like, well, he's really good. This guy's fantastic. We paid him a ton of money. So, you should take his advice. And I'm like, I'm quitting. I go today, or, this is not what we're doing. And I had to just endure 2 more. They said, look, at least do 2 phone calls. And I said, look, I'll sit there, but this is garbage. I'm not doing a word of it. But it was literally like, let's make Carl into a horror movie villain.
Yeah.
And I kept on having to say, we're adapting a true story. Like, when people read the book and they see that Carl wasn't, a Jason Voorhees type serial killer, they won't make any sense. But some of the wacky, it was just...
I didn't know about that.
No, don't. I shouldn't have told you, but it was just, yeah.
Okay. Well, for that guy in particular, I hope that the film is a massive success when it releases worldwide. It's been so great talking to you. Thanks for coming, and please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.